In the memorial of Pylyp Orlyk, presented before the Royal Council of Sweden on 26 August 1720, we discovered a remarkable set of handwritten Latin marginalia. Now among them was a request to adopt the surnames of Major General Urbanović and Polish Colonel Eperieschi for Hetman Pylyp Orlyk and his family to be used for traveling incognito and carrying out covert missions. Who were Urbanović and Eperieschi, the men whose names Hetman Pylyp Orlyk adopted for his secret operations? To answer this question, we must go back to the very beginning of the Great Northern War. The year is 1700. Western Europe trembles as the Great Northern War has begun. Muscovy, Denmark, and Saxony, the latter under the leadership of Polish King Augustus II the Strong, form a military alliance. Its goal is to crush the Swedish Empire, led by its 17-year-old king, Charles XII. The Tsar of Muscovy, Peter I, is determined to break through to the Baltic Sea at any cost. But the young Swedish king exceeds all expectations. Under his command, the army becomes the most formidable force in Europe. He doesn't just lead, he charges into battle himself. His presence alone ignites courage. Even the wounded rise to fight again. The first triumph, a lightning victory over Peter I at Narva, was due in part to the fact that the Cossacks had deliberately failed to come to the Muscovites' aid in time. Soon after, a new officer joins the Swedish king's army, Colonel Urbanović. Peter I recovers. He seizes Swedish provinces along the Baltic coast and founds the city of St. Petersburg. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, Hetman Yevhen Mazepa refuses to carry out Peter's scorched earth orders to lay waste to all Ukrainian lands in the path of the advancing Swedish army. To save his people, Hetman Mazepa initiates secret negotiations with Charles XII through Polish King Stanislav Leszczynski, seeking alliance with the Europe's most powerful army to liberate Ukraine from Muscovite control. A covert network is established between Hetman Mazepa and Charles XII, facilitated by Stanislaw Poniatowski's brother, who is later taken prisoner. On the 24th of October 1708, the Mazepa-led uprising begins. Over the following months, nearly 40,000 Ukrainians join the cause. When Peter I learns of Hetman Mazepa's defection to the Swedish side, he orders Prince Menshikov to raise the Hetmanate capital Baturin. In the spring, the Zaporozhian Cossacks arrive in Budysha, in central Ukraine, to declare their loyalty to Hetman Yevhen Mazepa and to the Swedish King Charles XII. Mazepa's forces now number 15,000 Cossacks. 11,000 of them will remain in reserve during the battle, supporting the 19,000-strong Swedish army. 1709, the Battle of Poltava, a turning point, a decisive clash. But King Charles XII is wounded in the leg, and the battle loses coordination. Against orders, General Lewenhaupt surrenders at Perevolochna. Thanks to Hetman Mazepa and the bravery of the Cossacks, the life of King Charles XII is saved. He is evacuated, along with his closest circle, to Bender. There in exile, the Hetman of Ukraine dies without leaving a final testament. But by his side until the very end is his most loyal ally, a diplomat, a soldier, and the future author of Ukraine's first constitution, Pylyp Orlyk. Following a legal dispute over Yevhen Mazepa's inheritance between his nephew Andrei Wojnarowski and the Cossack elite, Wojnarowski receives the funds from the estate. He then loans them to Charles XII to help sustain both the Swedish and Cossack armies. Andrei Wojnarowski declines becoming the next hetman. In his place, the Cossack officers and the Zaporozhian host elect Pylyp Orlyk as the new hetman. On the 5th of April 1710, they conclude with him and with Charles XII, protector of Ukraine, the pacts and resolutions of the rights and freedoms of the Zaporozhian host, better known as the Constitution of Pylyp Orlyk. This document was remarkably advanced for its time and predated many European constitutions. When sending a copy of the Constitution to the Cossacks remaining at the Dnieper, Charles XII reaffirmed their oath of loyalty with the words,
"With God's blessing, we shall not abandon our righteous war until Exercitus Zaporoviensis and the whole Ukraine have reclaimed their historical freedom."
Only one goal remained: to reclaim the territories now under Muscovite occupation. At this time, references to Colonel Urbanowicz begin appearing in Charles XII's financial records, and to Starost Eperieshi in administrative registries, both real figures, allies of Charles XII, and active players in Europe's geopolitical game. Dispatches sent from Bender on the 10th and 12th of November 1712 disclosed that Colonels Urbanowicz and Eperieshi were representing the Polish Confederation under King Leszczynski, a polity recognized by the Sublime Porte. In a letter dated the 2nd of May 1713, Heinrich von Müllern listed Eperieshi's official title as Michaele Eperias, Starost and Ensign of the Army of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. But let us return to the events of 1711. On the 23rd January 1711, Pylyp Orlyk signs an alliance with the Crimean Khanate, better known as the Cossack-Tatar Treaty of 1711. This marks the beginning of the campaign to liberate Ukraine. But at the last moment, as floodwaters rose during the siege of the Bila Tserkva fortress, the Tatars betrayed the alliance. They retreated, looted the land, and took civilians as captives. The campaign collapsed. At that time, Colonel Urbanowicz was in Bender. On the 25th of May, 1711, Stanislav Poniatowski mentions him in his correspondence. May 1711. Peter I marches southward through Ukraine, leaving scorched earth in his wake as he heads toward Constantinople. But at the Prut River, disaster strikes. The Muscovite army is surrounded by a 200,000-strong coalition of Turks, Tatars, the forces of Potocki, and the voivode of Kyiv. Colonel Urbanowicz plays an active role in the Battle of the Prut. 3 times Peter pleads for the chance to capitulate. He hands a hefty bribe to the Grand Vizier, promises to pay an annual tribute to the Crimean Khan, to withdraw his troops from Poland, and even swears to recognize Ukraine's independence, but betrays them. Peter I begins rewriting the terms of the Treaty of the Prut. Through his captives held in Constantinople, he channels bribes to everyone involved in the peace negotiations. He demands either that Ukraine be struck from the treaty entirely, or that the clauses be rewritten to keep it under his control. In a letter dated the 14th of September 1711, Charles XII instructs the Swedish envoy in Constantinople, Thomas Funk, to deliver a message to the Sultan. During negotiations with Peter, the Sultan must insist that Ukraine be recognized as an independent state. At that moment, Ukraine had a genuine chance at independence. At the same time, he should insist that this article, which affirms the freedom of Ukraine and all Zaporozhians, should immediately and fully come into force, so that all of Ukraine and Exercitus Zaporoviensis would thus fully enjoy their ancient freedoms and liberties, and would also be granted ownership of the territory within their ancient borders under the leadership of the present Hetman Pylyp Orlyk, in such a way that the people described above immediately gained the status of an independent state, and never again in any manner subordinated to the Tsar or remained under his protectorate. The Sultan demands that these promises be honored, or that Peter capitulate. Peter I refuses. The Sultan declares war. In February and March of 1713, raids swept across both right bank and left bank Ukraine, as well as Sloboda Ukraine, carried out by the Zaporozhians and Cossacks loyal to Pylyp Orlyk. The Muscovites mounted only defensive operations, but the Sultan's military resolve eventually faded. On the 13th of June, 1713, he signed the Treaty of Adrianople. Charles XII, together with Pylyp Orlyk, his family, and part of the Cossack army, returns to Sweden. The Orlyk family settles first in Ystad, then later in Kristianstad. His eldest son, Grigory, receives an education at Lund University. Meanwhile, Urbanović and Eperieshi continue their covert work. Allies of Pylyp Orlyk, members of the secret network first formed in the days of Ivan Mazepa. Their mission is to defend Ukraine, Sweden, and all of Europe from Muscovian aggression. They operate in the shadows, while Moscow installs puppet rulers and hunts down those who witnessed its defeats. In 1716, Muscovite agents captured Mazepa's nephew, Andriy Voinarovsky, in Hamburg. After brutal interrogation and torture in St. Petersburg, he was sentenced to lifelong exile in Siberia. His wife agreed to collaborate with the Muscovites, in exchange for a promise to trade the Orliks for her husband. Meanwhile, the Great Northern War continued. In the spring, tense peace negotiations began between Sweden and Muscovy. Peter I threatened.
40,000 armed negotiators will land on the Swedish coast.
In the summer of 1719, a force of 25,000 Muscovite troops aboard 132 galleys entered the Stockholm archipelago. Under Admiral Apraxin's command, they burned villages, plundered, and advanced deeper into Sweden. At the time, the Swedish Navy was weakened. Christopher Urbanović, with just 500 dragoons, held off the advance near Södertälje, but the coast was in flames. Yet the Swedes did not yield. The Queen forged an alliance with England, and British ships arrived to defend Stockholm. The peace talks continued, but now under new terms. Muscovy started feeling the pressure, and Pylyp Orlyk knew the moment to act had come. In response to the threat, he launched a secret operation. To divert the Muscovite army away from Sweden, he planned a journey south, to unite allies, and persuade the Ottoman Porte to send forces toward Azov and Astrakhan. The goal was to capture Astrakhan and the surrounding territories with the support of Ottoman arms. For the safety of his family, Hetman Pylyp Orlyk requested new identity documents under assumed names. For himself, those of Major General Urbanović and Colonel Eperieshi. For his eldest son, under the name Karoly Akanaber. This is attested to in the memorial, read before the Royal Council on the 26th of August, 1720.
To avoid all traps laid by the enemy, especially considering the offices Muscovite agents now hold in Germany, I must alter my course of action and travel incognito. I wish for my family to bear the surname of Major General Urbanović. However, in my correspondence, I shall use a different name, Colonel Eperieshi.
This is confirmed by other documents as well, and by a letter from his wife Anna to Madame von Höpken.
I need to take necessary precautions ahead of tomorrow's meeting with Major General Urbanović, who is arriving from Poland.
That same year, on the 20th of December, Kish Otaman Ivan Mochulsky called on Orlyk to return to Ukraine and resume the struggle against the Muscovites. By then, Urbanović had become a minister and official representative of the Polish king Stanisław Leszczyński in Stockholm. Eperieshi, meanwhile, served as a starist of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and remained a steadfast ally of both Sweden and Poland. On the 2nd of September 1720, King Frederick of Sweden personally authorized Orlyk's journey.
In recognition of the loyalty shown by the aforementioned Hetman to our state, we wish to provide assistance and grant him the use of an official vessel to be kept at his disposal and ready for use. Such is our command, Frederick.
On that same day, the Swedish king issued Hetman Orlyk a passport under the name of the Polish colonel Eperieshi, and one for his son, Grigory, under the name Karoly Akanaberg. These were vital security measures, essential for safeguarding the lives of Hetman and his family. Meanwhile, Swedish authorities uncovered evidence of a treacherous plot orchestrated by the Muscovites and the wife of Andriy Wojnarowski to trade the Orlyk family for her husband. In response, Swedish officials strictly forbade her from taking any action that might harm the Hetman's family. Afterward, she pleaded with Pylyp Orlyk not to travel through Hamburg. The Empire will not stop. Your family has become a target. Your struggle is now part of a larger game, the defense of Ukraine and of Europe.
Weapons and diplomacy have not broken Muscovite tyranny. My land is occupied, and the rights of the Cossacks are destroyed. But I have not had my final say yet.
France is our chance.
In 1725, King Louis XV marries Maria Leszczynska, the daughter of my ally. It may change everything. Through Stanislav Leszczyński, I will establish connections at Versailles. I will propose a revolution in Ukraine and demand the Hanoverian coalition, France, England, the Netherlands, and Prussia, extend their protection to Ukraine
and the Exercitus Zaporoviensis. Without peace in Ukraine, there can be no peace in Europe.
They hear me.
They promise gold, letters, alliance.
But I want more. At the Congress of Soissons, Muscovy must be made to restore our freedom. The year is 1726. When the sword fails to win freedom and diplomats bow with grace to tyranny, it is time to act from the shadows. If you cannot defeat evil, you must take its lead and destroy it from within. Through the imperial envoy, I made contact with Charles VI, Holy Roman Emperor. I built a network of alliances for one purpose only: to liberate Ukraine. King Stanislaw of Poland endorsed my vision
and formally reaffirmed it on the 7th of March, 1727.
I also secured the support of Sweden. We began to act in concert as one force.
Letters uncovered in the Warsaw Archive and later published by Metropolitan Ilarion unfold his vision with striking clarity.
My family's coat of arms is crowned with a sword, the Polish Nowina, or Novum in Latin, meaning new. That was the name of our ancestor, from whom our line descends. And so I named my work Novum, a new sword beneath the sun, one that sheds no blood. This enigmatic title conceals my identity.
In a letter dated the 18th of April, 1727, Pylyp Orlyk addresses the reverend pastor of the Armenians, Jacobus Kachod, a respected figure in both Constantinople and Malta. If this priest truly existed, Orlyk may have met him as early as 1712. Interestingly, it was in 1727 that the Jesuits published letters in which he was mentioned. A coincidence? Unlikely. Orlyk had long-standing ties with the Jesuits.
My secret plan was this. I intended to become the mentor of the young Peter II, the grandson of Peter I. He was only 11 years old. I promised the Pope and Emperor Charles VI that I would convert Peter II and through him all of Muscovy to Catholicism, if they agreed to support me. This plan had a precedent. In March of 1581, when Muscovite forces were surrounded on three sides, they wrote to the Pope expressing a willingness to accept Catholicism. They sought peace with the Poles and requested the title of Caesar for their Tsar. The Pope responded by sending Antonio Posavino to carry out the plan. But Swedish General Pontus de la Gardie learned of the negotiations and marched on Narva with his army. They slaughtered 7,000 Muscovites and razed the region all the way to Novgorod.
Ivan the Terrible surrendered to the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth,
ceded 34 towns and fortresses in Livonia, and signed a peace treaty. The decline of Muscovy had begun. The memory of that defeat still lingered. Besides, I believed I could be the one to turn the Tsar's gaze back toward our rights and freedoms.
In a letter from Rome, dated the 10th of January, 1728. I signed my name differently, de Puget. This alias concealed my opportunity. On the 19th of November, 1727, the king issued a renewed endorsement. They believed in my vision, and I believed in Ukraine.
That same year, Pylyp Orlyk brought England into his plan. In a letter to James Stuart, the Jacobite claimant to the English throne, then living in Rome, and held in high esteem by Pope Clement XI as a devout Catholic, Orlyk appealed for support. He asked Stuart to advocate for his cause before the Pope and the Republic of Venice. From that point on, he conducted his correspondence with kings under the names de Puget and Novum. He wrote letters under the name Eperieschi, and he crossed borders under the alias Urbanowicz.
The Holy Roman Emperor Charles VI issued the Pragmatic Sanction, which in the absence of a male heir would transfer all imperial power to his female descendants. Most states refused to support the decree, and it wasn't until 1725 that he secured backing from Spain, and later from the Muscovites. My secret plan unraveled, only because His Imperial Majesty Charles VI suddenly wished for Sweden to join Spain and Muscovy in backing the sanction. That was impossible, and so he withdrew his support from my efforts at the Russian court. Empress Catherine I had granted her approval of my noble title, yet her signature never reached the seal. And Menshikov, that Menshikov, who never tires of finding new ways to punish me, appointed the aged Danilo Apostol to the Hetmanate of Ukraine in my stead. But he is no Cossack. He is, as the record states, Moldavus obscurissimo loconatus, a Moldavian of most obscure origin. And in all his conduct, he seeks only to curry favor with the Muscovites in Ukraine. Apostol is no hetman, only a shadow, blind in both body and soul. Yet I do not yield.
In 1720, Pylyp Orlyk, the King of Sweden, and their allies and confidants succeeded in confusing and outmaneuvering the Muscovites.
We deceived them. While they chased a ship bound for Lubeck, I calmly made my way to England.
That very maneuver with two ships would later be repeated by Pylyp Orlyk's son, Hrihori, henceforth known as Gregoire, at a pivotal moment in European history.
My son Hrihori, my son, you are the one who carries my struggle forward. Disguised as Monsieur de la Motte, you reached the very Khan himself, prodding Turkey, France, and all of Europe to move.
Following the death of the military commander of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Józef Żywuski, Gregoire Orlyk entered royal service under Stanislav Poniatowski. Gregoire Orlyk was entrusted with the task of restoring the Polish crown to Stanislav Leszczyński. Gregoire Orlyk arrives in Paris under the name of Gustav Bartel, a Swede, to discuss the joint strategy of Sweden, France, the Commonwealth, Crimea, and the Cossacks. The goal of the Orlyk family was an independent Ukraine, a fully sovereign republic within a renewed commonwealth, based on the original draft of the Treaty of Gadyach. Spring of 1730. Under the alias Officer Haag, Gregoire Orlyk secretly meets with his father, Pylyp Orlyk, two men in the shadows of history, preparing a decisive counterstrike. In 1732, Gregoire visits the Crimean Khan under the alias Monsieur de la Motte. Crimea pledges its support for the Orlyks' plan. By the terms of the peace agreement with the Muscovites, Pylyp Orlyk was to remain exiled within the Ottoman Empire. But the documents bearing the names de Puget, Urbanowicz, Eperieschi, Novum, and La Motte, used by Pylyp Orlyk's son, he enabled the Orlyks to carry out covert missions undetected by the Muscovites and to move freely across Europe in pursuit of Ukraine's liberation and the restoration of its rights and freedoms. These names are the codes in this grand game. Only now are we beginning to grasp the scale of their strategic vision and audacious plans. Perhaps the key to the Hetman's burial place lies with them too. But now we know one thing. Thanks to the Orlyk family, Stanislav Leszczyński once again became king. Muscovy lost. Amid the decisive battle for the Polish crown in Warsaw and Ukraine's continued struggle, one name echoes once again.
Colonel Eperius!
Who was he? The man who stopped the Muscovites at the gates of Warsaw and made the coronation of King Stanislav possible, all to one day liberate Ukraine and secure its independence.
I never surrendered. I waged a silent war in the shadows, because I knew that even in darkness, every step we take brings us closer to the dawn of freedom.
But still, who is Colonel Eperius?